So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. So today I'm going to be talking about how to price new products. My name is Edwin Graham. I'm an actuarial data scientist at Akur8. My background is in personal lines insurance pricing in the UK, and currently I work in Akur8 supporting our clients and our prospective clients on how to use our pricing software. Um, Let me move on. So just before I start today's presentation, let me do a very quick advert for another webinar that you might be interested in. So my colleague Max will be talking about how to demystify artificial intelligence on the 26th of June. And he always puts together very interesting content and delivers it in a very unique and entertaining way, I would say. So if you're free on the 26th, I would recommend checking that out. Today's presentation, as I said, is on pricing new products with no data, or rather pricing new products with no internal data. So couple of quick caveats before I begin. So I don't have direct experience. So I have some experience with pricing new products, but indirectly via customers of mine. And a lot of the talk will be geared around something like a new MGA who's launching a new product. I'm thinking a lot in the personal lines space just because my background is in personal lines, but I'll try to be a little bit more general wherever I can. And if you do work for an established insurer and have um, uh, no intention ever of working for a new startup, then hopefully I can change your mind a bit, and B, there is something for you at the very end of the presentation. I've put in that what can established insurers learn from how new market entrants work. Okay, so I want to start by talking about the splitting the process of launching a new product into the different stages that you might see typically, and then I'll go through the presentation and drill down into a bit more detail on each one of these stages. So first of all, before the product is launched, we have absolutely no internal data at all. So we don't have conversion data, we don't have exposure data, we don't have claims data. Our goal is to develop set of rates to go to market. Once we've launched, then still we don't really have any usable claims data, but at the very beginning, you'll be able to monitor what policies you're writing and start making adjustments and iterations on top of the initial go-to-market rates. After that, once you've gone to market, that's a sort of hard, you're either before the launch or you're after launch. Everything, or the stages post-launch sort of merge into each other, but there's going to be a certain point at which you start to see enough data from claims where you can make there's some usable data there. So maybe the claims are not fully developed. You can't build models, but you can start incorporating some of the information that you're observing with claims trends into your pricing. And then lastly, there's a sort of maturing stage where now you do kind of have enough volume of high quality claims data that you can start building models, and the challenge in this stage is transitioning from your initial pricing to a more traditional way of doing pricing. So starting off with the pre-launch stage. So at the very beginning, congratulations. Being in on something at the very beginning is an opportunity that doesn't come around very often. But there's a long road ahead. Um, there's certainly a non-zero failure rate for new market entrants. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you're going to be one of the successful ones, um, maybe by following some of the tips I'm going to give you. But I think, the important thing is that at this stage, there is a reason why you're starting off on this journey. So you have something, your company has something that distinguishes you from the competition. So it could be a way that you bundle your coverages into a product. It could be that you have a novel distribution channel. You could be doing something like using AI and automation for claims handling, which I think if you're doing that, hopefully you have the right controls in place to do that well. But you've got something that sets you apart from the competition, and that's going to lead you to the following question, which is, what customers are we targeting? So why are we launching? What customers are we going to be wanting to sell to? So before we start thinking about building a set of rates, we really need to know who those rates are aimed at. So which risks are going to be outside of our risk appetite that we don't need to focus on? Which risks do we want to write less of? Which ones do we want to target? What events are going to be covered? What exclusions, limits, and deductibles? In other words, what actually are the risks that we are pricing for? And I think, obviously this is a strategic planning stage, and but I think, yeah, how will the product be bundled? What options will we offer? So, what do we need to price for? I think at this stage, it's very useful to think in terms of three distinct sets of risks. So, firstly, the universe of all the risks that are in this line of business, and that your competitors are potentially offering prices for, and this is the sort of universe of everything that's out there. But then a subset of that is going to be a subset, the subset that you actually need to generate prices for. So which risks are within your risk appetite and within your underwriting footprint. Obviously, really important to know this before building a set of rates. Although obviously, the path I'm laying out here is not necessarily a linear path. There can be some iterations. So the underwriting footprint might be tweaked and changed and adjusted during the go-to-market pre-launch period. But yeah, at the very beginning, it's good to have at least a very strong idea of what your underwriting footprint is likely to look like on day one. And then, who are the risks that we really are positioning the offering for, that we really want to target, and where it's very important that not only are we offering a price, but this price is competitive and we're going to generate some volume of business. So developing this overarching strategy might involve a lot of backwards and forth between product, marketing, underwriting, and pricing. Although, at this stage, if it's a very small company, that might only be 3 or 4 people. But this is what I would call the strategic planning stage before we start even thinking about developing prices. Once we're kind of happy that we know what our aims are, what our strategic goals are for the set of rates we want to go forward with, let's start to think about what we're missing in compared to our competition. So there are lots of established companies out there that are working with data that they have, internal data that we don't have access to. What is it that we're missing? So first of all, we don't have any exposure data at the very start. So Uh, Established insurers, of course, have big back books of business. They've written business in the past and collected data on the risk that they're writing. So we need something similar. We need some information about what risks are out there, what is in that universe of risks, what risks are in that will fall into that underwriting footprint that we want to offer prices for. And what are the key variables of those risks? So I've given an example. Most of my examples are going to be motor personalized examples. I know that people who don't work in motor often get sick of motor being the default example everywhere, but I'm sorry, please bear with me. So that's one sort of source of data that we're missing. The other, obviously really important, claims data. What are the claims that have happened in the past? This is what's going to help us understand what claims are going to happen in the future. So, what claims have happened in the past? Which risks do they relate to? What was the cause of loss, the loss date, the amount of the loss, the final settlement amount? We don't know any of this. So, again, I've got an example of claims data. So, a car that's been stolen from North London. We don't have any data like this at the very start. And the other thing that we don't have at the very start is an understanding of where a set of rates, a proposed price might sit in relation to what the competitors are charging. So it may be that an established business doesn't actually collect market position data directly, but they all indirectly understand the market via which quotes are binding. We don't have any data like this to begin with. So established insurers have obviously a big advantage over us in the fact that in the sense that they have all of this data available to them. What can we do instead? So we need some alternative sources of data. So the availability and relevance of alternative sources of data is going to vary a lot depending on the line of business that we're writing and the country that we're working in. So I've got a few examples, or so a few categories and some examples within each category. So number one, really, really useful if it's available, filed rates. So this is something that's not available in the UK, but in the US in particular, I think pretty much almost every state has a regulator that requires you to file a rating plan. And for many of those states, those rating plans are publicly available for anyone who's interested, including competitors, to look at. And it's actually very, very common in the States for people to file basically a copy of somebody else's rates. This is called a Me Too filing. And of course, if it's available, it's a very useful starting point for your pricing. Of course, there are some downsides to just copying a competitor, and actually in the States they do a good job of hiding some of the calculations that would need to be done to actually perfectly align to a competitor's rates, but it gives you a very, very good idea of the rates that people are charging for different risks. But of course, for many jurisdictions, nothing like that exists. Another source of data, aggregated data. Now, this is really, really useful in the UK in particular. So, but it may not be available everywhere or for every line of business. So, in the UK, aggregators, by which I mean price comparison websites, they account for a very large percentage of the new business sales in personal lines in particular, and they generate millions of quotes every week across all of them. I mean, a lot of those quotes will be duplicates, but still, there's a very high volume of data coming through all of the time, and very high quality. So, yeah, they collect a vast amount of very rich data on what people are charging for what risks. And it can be an invaluable source of data for an MGA who's just starting out and designing some rates to go to market. So the other thing that's useful to know is that these price comparison websites compete with each other, and they're very, very highly incentivized to encourage new market entrants onto their platforms. So very likely the data can be got hold of either free or for a very minimal cost, certainly a cost that's much less than the data is actually worth. So very, very worthwhile to use this data if it's a tool available for the line of business and the product line. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this data in the rest of the launch period. The slides, but moving on to other sources of data that might be useful. Government data. So very often, and again, it's going to vary from country to country, but very often there are lots of open source data sets that are available. Often census data is really useful, particularly for pricing for geography. In the UK, I've certainly used police data to help build some features again on geography that were useful for pricing perils that involve theft in particular. So you can use police data in the UK to find things like the number of acquisitive crimes within a certain radius of a location. And that's really useful for pricing theft or other perils that involve a moral hazard. But there can be vast amounts of government data depending on country, and often these are very useful. Quotes directly from competitors. So if you don't have access to aggregated data, then I would consider this essential. What I'm going to talk about is for the rest of the launch period is really making sure that the rates that you design are aligned with the market. So if you don't want to go to the market with rates that are very, very misaligned with what your competitors are doing, particularly because you don't have that view of past claims that they do. So if you don't have access to aggregated data, then directly getting some quotes from competitors, I think, is essential. And the idea would be to get a basket of risks together that you think are representative of the risks on the market, and gather some quotes and use that as your starting point. Industry data, so again, is going to vary a lot by country and line of business, but this can be useful to understand things like the average loss ratio that or combined ratio that your competitors are experiencing today or over time, potentially even some projections of things like claims inflation into the future. And there may be industry bodies who will publish or sell you things like some standard risk classifications on things like industry type for SME pricing, or occupation, or vehicle for motor, that might be a very useful starting point for your pricing. Open source map data. So there are sites out there like OpenStreetMap that allow you to download all kinds of geographical information from which you can derive all kinds of useful rating factors that sort of external data rating factors on location that you can then use to tweak and change your pricing at a location level. I think really, really useful, not just for new entrants, but also for traditional insurers as well. And lastly, non-traditional data. So this is basically the everything else bucket. So I guess open source map data is a non-traditional source of data. But there are all kinds of non-traditional sources of data out there. You can find all kinds of data providers who are often trying to sell you data. Some of the data is more useful than others, I would say. So some examples might be satellite data that could be used to classify different roof types for buildings. In the UK, in the personal line space, certainly data from credit reference agencies has been actually quite a standard source of data for a very long time, almost to the point where it might be no longer considered non-traditional. You know, almost using a credit score to price is almost a traditional rating factor at this point in the UK. But um, the idea is you know to look what's out there, gather whatever you can that might be useful as a starting point for the data that we're going to use to start building our set of rates. By the way, I didn't say at the very beginning, but I'm going to save some time at the end for questions. If you have any in the meantime, it's very useful if you were to type them into the Q&A section in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. If we'll get to as many as we can at the end if there's time. Okay, so that's the sources of data. So I want to just doubly stress the importance of market data. So this was a very, very good job of filling the gaps. So if you remember, those gaps were exposure data, claims data, and sort of competitiveness data. So firstly, exposure data. So just the quotes that are out there tell you a lot about the types of risks that are being underwritten in this line of business. So you know, a good snapshot of new business quotes at a period of time. You're going to be writing your initial policies at new business. You don't have a renewing back book of business, so it's a very, very representative sample of the types of risks that you're going to be pricing for from day one. So really good replacement for a set of exposure data. We're not gathering necessarily claims data directly, but of course our competitors have past claims data. They're trying to price their quotes at a level that is going to cover future claims based on their past claims. So indirectly, the claims that your competitors have experienced is going to be sort of embedded within the prices that they're offering. So it's going to give us a good starting point on which risks are high risk, which risks are low risk, based on what our competitors are pricing, and we can make some assumptions about what proportion of the premiums that they're offering are actually going to be covering the future claims. So a lot of what we're going to do is going to be based on assumptions at the very beginning. We're going to have to apply a lot of expert judgment, but the market data gives you a really good starting point on understanding what claims we're likely to have in the future with like I said, with some assumptions. And of course, by definition, that having market quote data does help you understand the competitive landscape and helps you understand, if this is our go-to-market set of rates, where do they sit relative to the quotes that our competitors are making. So really, really useful. These are the big price comparison websites that we have in the UK, Compare the Market, Money Supermarket, and so on. And if in personal lines in the UK, I would consider it as essential to buy or receive a free sample of data from one or more of these price aggregators. Of course, in other lines of business, you may have to have a basket of risks and quote yourself, but I think it's very, very essential that you start from a set of some market data that you've gathered. So how are we going to proceed from the data that we've gathered? So first of all, we've gathered this market data. We've enriched that data by merging on maybe some of the other sources of data, maybe some of the geographic data or data from other sources that I mentioned. So we have a sort of enriched market price data set that we're going to be starting our analysis from. So I think it's worth sort of splitting what we're going to do into two parts. So first of all, segmentation. Which of our risks are we going to price high? Which are we going to price low? What's going to be the price differential? And calibration. So what is the right base level to set such that we're writing the right volume of business, so we're not setting our prices too high and writing not enough business to cover our fixed expenses. But also, we're not pricing too low. We're pricing high enough to cover our claims costs and essentially hit a target combined operating ratio that we want to hit. So segmentation, I think, reverse engineering your competitors' prices, or using a Me Too model if you're in the States, is a really, really good starting point for your segmentation models. But we obviously we have a unique product offering. We have a set of target risks that we want to be competitive for. So we don't just want to offer an average market price to everybody. We need to analyze what we've done, adjust it for our unique circumstances, and iterate. And each iteration, we're comparing the reverse engineered or the set of rates, the segmentation models that we're producing against the raw market data, so we can see if we had been in the market with these rates when this market data was being produced, where would we have been below the market? Where would we have been above the market? Which risks would we likely have written? And again, this will involve some expert judgment and some assumptions. But really, we want to focus on where our segmentation models are below the market, because these are the ones we're likely to write. And what we don't want to do is offer quotes that are far below the market prices our competitors are pricing. Yeah, of course. Calibration, we want to set a base level that hits a target combined operating ratio. We obviously need to consider claims costs, expenses, commission, but also we want to, that this our sort of book rates that we're going to produce. If we're going to be discounting from that, we need to take that into account. So what's the average level of discount going to be? What's our discount policy going to be? And we need to take that into consideration when we're setting the base rate. Of course, we must inflate the period we're going to price for, and again we're going to have to go back and analyze every time we segment. We should then calibrate and then analyze against the market rates that we've built to see which risks we'd be likely to write. So this is my sort of pre-launch summary of everything we talked about. We start with a strategic planning. What do we want to achieve with a set of rates? We gather as much data as we can, high quality as we can. We build some market price models. By the way, apologies to anyone from the UK for the US spelling throughout this presentation. It was deliberate, but yeah. We built some market price models. And then we iterate through this segmentation, calibration, and competitive analysis phase until we land on a set of rates that we believe will be competitive, but not too competitive, and target the customers we want to target, given that the offering that we're putting to the market. And when we're happy with that, test it, test it, test it, test it, because the last thing you want to do is go to the market with something that contains bugs but yeah, that's the idea for the pre-launch period. Then obviously we're going to launch the product, and this is where the difficulty, the tough thing starts. So we're going to start gathering some data at this point. So this is the launch period. So we don't have a back book of business that we need to protect. So we are at some advantage over our competitors in that respect, because we can be a bit more flexible when it comes to changing things at new business without having to worry about how it's going to reflect on renewals. I really believe that we need to, depending on the distribution channel that we're going for, but if we're going direct to the market, we should set ourselves up with a modern tech stack, which allows us to change things very quickly, so we can be flexible, and also do A/B testing as well. I think that's really useful. Of course, if we're selling via brokers, not really possible to do that. But if our distribution channel is direct, I think it's really important. So the very beginning, we don't have all we're going to start gathering is which the data we're gathering is just which policies we're converting. So unexpected spikes are indicative that something is wrong. We're mispriced in certain segments. So this is what we need to constantly be monitoring for once we go live. And we need that ability to react and adjust to those. It is easy to over or under react, so it's going to take a lot of expert judgment. If you see a spike in conversion, is that noise? Is that signal? Is it a combination of the two? And I think the best approach, the best advice I can give you is that we should move towards the data. So if there's a big conversion spike that suggests that we're maybe 20% underpriced for a certain segment, but the data is not very credible, maybe we don't have the binary choice of a 0% price increase or a 20% price increase. We can move somewhere in between. So yeah, and in time we will be gathering enough data that we can start actually building some models to help monitor key trends. I think a lot of what I've said, reverse engineering the market prices, building conversion models. I'm talking a lot about modeling. It does help to have a good pricing tool. There are lots on the market, of course, but some are better than others. So yeah, A/B testing I think is really important if it's possible. May not be possible depending on the distribution channel. We don't have very much data compared to established insurers, so we do want to maximize the quality, and A/B testing allows you to isolate the effects of a specific change that you're making. So you make a change without an A/B test, and something different happens. Did something different happen because something else changed at the same time? It's very hard to know. Whereas if you're able to A/B test, you can very easily, you can ask a question: what would happen if I did this? And you can answer that question. So I think it's really useful if it's available. We're into the emerging trends now. If that's immediately post-launch. So this emerging trends phase, if you remember, this is where we start having enough claims reported that we can start incorporating some information from the claims trends, at least on frequency, into the pricing process. So claims frequency is only half the story. So we don't necessarily want to overreact to claims frequency. Again, it's very possible to have segments that are high frequency and low severity. But once we start building up some claims data, definitely it can be worth sort of incorporating that into the prices. So we now have three sources of data that we can monitor. So market data that we built that we had in the past, or maybe we are also buying it as we're going along. Conversion data, the business that we're writing against the quotes that we're making, and the claims that are coming in and being reported. And now we have three dimensions. I think it's worth doing a lot more on setting up a good process to monitor the portfolio and track the progress, be able to dive in segment by segment and look at what's going on. These claims trends could support potential price changes that you want to make based on conversion, or they could work against them, and you can sort of take a holistic view. But yeah, like I said, claims frequency is only half the story, and this data is not going to be mature, so we don't want to over or underreact to it. Some trends that are not statistically significant could still be worth acting on. So let's say you have a specific, you're working in motor and you have a specific type of vehicle that is repeatedly being stolen in a specific area. May make sense to not write that business or to really put a big load in. Again, having prices that are too high is much less costly than having prices that are too low. Having prices that are too high just means we won't write that business. Having prices that are too low could cost us a lot in the long run. So, we want to err on the side of caution in some respect. But early claims data can be a useful lead indicator, even if it's not mature. But we want to remember that it's noisy and not to overreact to it. But at this stage, we could start looking at some early modeling, but I'm going to get to that a bit more in the maturing section. So here, this is the point in time post launch where we're now starting to get a high enough volume of claims data and starting to have fully developed claims data that we can start moving towards traditional pricing approaches, and this can lead to some sort of I guess teething problems in moving from one to the other. So just to sort of set this up, I mean, it takes a while for data to mature. So here, and we're only looking at policies that were written in year one. Now, I think in pricing we tend to look more at earned exposures versus written exposures, but you get the idea from this chart. If we write a certain volume of business and we're writing business at a constant rate throughout 1 year, then by the end of year one, we've written 100% of the policy, so we know what we've written in that year. It takes till the end of year two before we have earned all of the exposure that we've written, and if we also have obviously different lines of business, different territories are going to have different sort of claims development rates, but the claims are going to develop after the exposures have been written. So and this is a relatively short tail business. This is a sort of made up example, but based on UK motor. Now, the point I want to really get across is we don't necessarily need to wait until a certain moment when our data has crossed the threshold of credibility to then model and use that data. We don't have this binary choice of after 3 years the data is mature enough that we can start modeling, or after 2 years, I guess, of earned exposures, or a year and a half, or whatever. We don't have to have this hard cutoff point. We can start. These curves are continuous and sloping upwards. So there is useful information even at quite early stages, that we might want to start incorporating, but we don't want to overreact. We don't want to um, incorporate trends that are not credible and not statistically significant. And that's the challenge. And what 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 I want to get across is that there are approaches out there that are credibility approaches where we can um, weight the our sort of existing beliefs about risk um, and market position, or mainly I'm talking about risk, versus the claims data, which may not be fully credible, might be low volume and not fully developed. Um, so using a credibility approach is an approach where we can incorporate whatever signal does exist in that new data, and it may be that it's a lot of noise and only a small amount of signal. Um, but over time, the idea is that weighting, that balance would shift more towards the data and away from the existing starting beliefs. But this can be done in a slow, sloping way and not in a sudden, we've waited to a certain point when the data is mature, we built a model, now we go live with this model. It doesn't have to be like that. We can start getting the some value out of the data as soon as there's some credible signal that can be understood from the data. So yeah, so in our case, the starting point could be our go-to-market prices, and the new data could be the emerging claims experience that's starting to mature and starting to build up in volume. And one technique that you could use to do this is lasso credibility, which is a multivariate credibility approach, where the end point is a GLM model, or the equivalent to a GLM model, but in the process we weight our existing beliefs against the trends, the signal that we can understand from the training data that we're using. And it's not the topic of today's talk, but I'm sure there'll be another webinar on lasso credibility at some point, and we have papers that are available for you if you check out our website. I recommend. But finally, before I start answering questions, what can established insurers learn from this? So I assume that most of you do work for established insurers and are not at the beginning of a pricing a new product. Well, we want to protect our competitive advantage as an established insurer in areas where we are competitive, that are within our competitive footprint. But the challenge as an established insurer is protect, but also to grow profitably, which is challenging, potentially into areas where they're within our risk appetite. Maybe they're within our target competitive footprint, but they're not within our current competitive footprint. And in those market segments, effectively, we are acting as a new market entrant in some ways. So is it possible? So I'm asking you in your pricing processes to think about these segments in a different way, maybe to price these segments, weighting a little bit more towards what your competitors are doing versus based on your past claims experience, because potentially you don't have much past claims experience for certain segments that you haven't written too much of in the past. On the right-hand side, by the way, this is supposed to be a representation of the sort of competitive landscape, where the red hotspots are, market segments where you're writing a lot of business, and the blue cooler colored areas are areas that you potentially want to expand and grow profitably into. It's always a challenge because we our competitors are sort of doing the same thing to us. But the other thing is that we of course always have to be mindful that we have a back book of business that we need to protect. So it's not always easy to be as flexible as a new market entrant in changing our new business prices very flexibly, like they can. But still, I think it's worth considering some of the approaches that a new market entrant might take into segments that you're not currently pricing much today. I think with that, it's time for me to move to questions. So I suggest you use the put your hand up, but I can see that there are a few questions in the Q&A already. So I'm going to go through in order. So the first one was from Andrea. As an alternative source of data, would you use synthetic data to calculate the risk premium? For example, when a company wants to launch a new digital product and there is no information available, would you combine it with real data from similar products? Yes, I guess so. Andrea, do you want to maybe you can unmute and because I'm are you talking about products where there's literally no competitors and there's just no information available? Um, okay. I think it's yeah, hi, Andrea.
Hi. Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking about products, digital products, where we want to use like telematics
Hmm.
data, but the company doesn't have this information yet because they didn't have telematics in the past. So I was thinking about it, like using some synthetic data and pricing risk premium model.
Uh,
The
yeah.
question was, would you combine this synthetic data with real data from similar products? Because you have some information about your current clients.
Yes.
And yeah, okay.
Yes. So absolutely. So this is really challenging because you don't understand necessarily what the distribution of the telematics data is going to look like once you start gathering it, and how it's going to correlate with the traditional rating factors that you use today. So I think yes, definitely you will need to start building some synthetic data in order to test that the prices you build work, but it's going to be a lot of expert judgment, and there's going to be a lot of testing and learning when you initially go live. And I think from telematics products that the best thing to do is probably have a starting price which is based on the more traditional data anyway, and
Mm-hmm.
the telematics data is used to discount based on good driving behavior. So actually, um, you know, your challenge is really only about how that discount strategy will look like. And I think it's going to take a lot of expert underwriter judgment for you to do that. But yeah, does that answer your question well enough?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was curious to see also your perspective on that because I'm working on a project now and I wanted to see a different opinion. Yeah, thank
Perfect.
you.
Your question. So the next question, Vidget, can you explain what you mean by A/B testing? So this is where you are essentially you have two pricing strategies that are live at the same time, and that a new customer will be randomly assigned one of the two strategies, or pseudo randomly based on some of their statistic rating factors. And obviously this is not possible if you distributing your prices to brokers, because you can't give two strategies to a broker because they will just use the strategy that gives the lower price and can completely undermine your experiment. But the idea is that this is an experiment where you're controlling for everything else. So you're gathering data on which customers will bind to your quotes based on the two different strategies. And because you're running the two strategies simultaneously, you know that any differences that you pick up are only based on the change in strategy and some random noise, of course, because there's a lot of randomness in the universe that unfortunately we have to deal with. Well, or fortunately, because it gives us jobs. Um, I'll move on to the next one. What plan would you follow to retro engineer a competitor's tariff from online quotes, knowing that you only have access to the premium of specific formulas that are the combination of multiple coverages? Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't mention this in the maturing section, but yeah, at the very start, you're not really going to be able to split out across different perils. Like your question mentions motor perils, so TPL, third party liability, um, third party liability, thefts, accidental damage, and so on. So this is part of the sort of teething problems that you get into in the maturing stage, where you're going to start off from something that is just combined all perils together. And over time, as you gather more data, you want to move towards a more traditional approach where you rate by peril. Um, and again, my answer here is that a credibility approach is really useful. So here, your starting point, your complement of credibility will be your combined prices that combine all perils together. And then when you start collecting data where you can actually see the trends being a bit different for third party liability versus accidental damage, you can incorporate that data and rather than at a moment in time, you go from everything to splitting it out and making that binary decision. You can slowly move your prices towards per peril rating using something like lasso credibility. Um, I hope that answers your question. There's a couple more. I think we'll have time for a couple more. So Jacob or Jakob, I'm sorry, I don't know which, says, I want to design a new health insurance pricing in a new market in Nigeria, Sokoto state precisely, but due to a lack of historical data and claim data, I'm only able to get data on some healthcare variables that can affect certain products or diseases. And the number of faculty attendances for a year from the government, what approach would be adequate to begin? It's a really, really specific question. And it's also, I would say, in an area that I don't have a huge amount of expertise. I would probably be happier to take that question offline. Sorry, Jacob. But someone, yeah, sorry about that. An anonymous attendee says, I hope it is fair to summarize that most of us Americans view the British market as the most sophisticated in the world from a pricing perspective. However, it appears functionally broken as it's converged to race to zero and become heavily commoditized. Assuming the market would stay that way, where would a new entrant in the market best find value? It seems tempting to try to differentiate with better product offerings, but impossible to scale up and cover expenses with that approach. Yeah, it's a good point. I think that in the UK the regulatory environment is shifting. So, for example, we now we have a ban on price walking, so we must price our renewing customers at a price that is no more than so it can be the same or lower than what we would price them at new business. And this means that the new business market is no longer a race for thinner and thinner and thinner margins, because big established insurers that have a big back book of business to protect need to offer new business prices that are more reasonable and aren't just aimed towards bringing someone in at new business and then ramping their prices up at renewal. So I think it is the market is changing in the UK, and I think that there are a lot of new market entrants all the time, and the failure rate is quite high in the UK, but obviously people think it's worth trying. Um, yes, I think if you're going to be a new market entrant, you really need some way of differentiating yourself, be it the way you distribute, be it your product offering, something that's adding distinct value, rather than just copy and pasting, reverse engineering the market, and trying to just sort of compete on the margins. Um, so yeah, I hope that answers your question at least to some extent, but yes, it it is a challenge for new market entrants in the UK, but they have access to very high quality data, and they do have some competitive advantage in not having that back book of business to protect. Um, there are no more questions in the Q&A, and we only have 3 minutes left. Thank you to Gabrielle for the word of thanks in the chat.
Edwin,
Yeah,
just jumping in. I see a few questions in the chat as
in
well.
the chat. Okay, so yeah, yes, okay, so any threshold in conversion monitoring that should be alarming on mispricing. Yes, it's going to vary. Obviously, the idea in the initial go-to-market stage is that you're making some assumptions and having a good idea of which quotes you're expecting to convert based on the competitive analysis that you've done. So where you see conversion rate that's much higher than what you're expecting, that is what is alarming. And you know the threshold isn't necessarily on how big the spike is. It's how significant that spike is. So if the segment is very, very small and you don't have very much data, it's going to be noisy. So yes, there's no specific threshold, but again, my I think my overarching theme is going to be, it's going to say that you don't need to think about a threshold where above this threshold we apply a big price adjustment, below the threshold we ignore it. That you can think about it more in a continuous in a continuous space where you move towards the data. And then the very last question, I'll be quick because we only have 1 minute left. What data are important when developing non-traditional insurance? Example, weather index. Is there also a way you can develop the product manually? I think it's hard. I think there you want to be buying some weather models, because you know weather modeling and cat modeling is very, very hard. I don't have a good answer. I think is another one we probably should take offline. I do apologize, but and then that was the last question. And again, so thank you again, Amanda, for another word of thanks in the chat. And I think that will be it for the webinar. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and have a great rest of the day.